Hey guys, welcome to the Bandemic podcast brought to you by Kinsman. I am Ray Botter, your host. Tonight on the show, we have Mr. Austin Skinner, a Coastal Bend native that has made his way to Nashville and is doing some amazing things. Tonight, we're going to talk about what it takes to be a musician in Nashville, what it's like to grow up in a small town and end up in a big city, and of course, we're going to hit the natural gear stuff that we all know and love. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Mr. Austin Skinner. Austin, what is up, brother?
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Good, man. Glad you're here. How's things?
Not too bad, all things considered. We really took a big slowdown back in March, and so only recently we've been starting to kind of get a little bit busier. You know, certain festivals, or I shouldn't say festivals, but concerts are starting to do the social distancing thing. I played a show a couple weeks ago at a new brewery just south of town. And the way the structure was, you bought 6 tickets for a bigger price, and you were kind of bundled or potted together, and they called it a pod.
Interesting.
So you're starting to see a lot of that for the social distancing thing, and some clubs are starting to open at 30% capacity and whatnot. So it's, we're slowly getting back to a little bit of normalcy, but I think we still may have a ways to go.
Any drive-in concerts lately? I know those have been a thing.
Well, they've been. I've heard about them. I just haven't done one personally. I haven't been to one. It's kind of weird. I feel like as time goes on, if you're a musician, you get a little more picky about going to a show because, you don't want to. Not to sound too negative, but you don't want to be disappointed, and you don't want to. You want to support, but at the same time, you start to really get specific about, I would be willing to go see this person in concert, or I hear the band with so-and-so is great, so I'll go see them. I just haven't done the drive-in thing yet, though.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we will talk about COVID, but for right now, I think what we like to start with is just a little bit of your background, like what your connection is to Coastal Bend, and maybe just a little bit about, what gave you the drive to pursue music as you have?
Well, that's a lot. I am from the Coastal Bend, Kingsville, King Ranch area, and mom and dad. Mom's a singer-songwriter, or she says she's not anymore, but I think she still is. Dad's a guitar player, and has been a gearhead and a gear nut for longer than I even knew what that was, and so. Growing up, seeing him play in bars and clubs and stuff, and hearing mom play around the house and all of that. And then got into my first band when I was 15 or so, and lied my way into that band. And, said I could play and sing, and I could kind of sing, but I really couldn't play. So it was kind of a good way to learn on the fly and be in a band with some dudes that were older than me and could, tell me what I was doing wrong and show me how to do it right. And then went to music school and dropped out of that, and then moved to Austin and Houston and played all over the southern region of the U.S. for 3 years or so, and kind of danced a little tango with a few record labels and all of that, in and out of a few bands, went back to music school, and then after college eventually came to Nashville because I'd always been curious about it. I'd already lived in Austin, and I had a couple of friends who lived here who were doing well and who said, you ought to give it a shot and see what you think. I think you could do well, and so that's how I ended up here, all the way from the Coastal Bend.
I think that's a good 10, 15 years in a good 2 minutes, right?
I could have gone into more detail. Maybe we will, but I just wanted to make it succinct as possible.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. So, just question, what are some of your influence? What really kind of drew you to guitar and singing? Because some people kind of tend to go to one or the other, but you focused on both and you've excelled on both. So what did that kind of look like? Who are your influences?
The earliest memory of someone doing both and doing them both well, in my opinion, would probably be the first conscious memory I could probably remember would be someone like Steve Warner, who was a big pop country artist in the 80s. And he had a string of hits, and he was you listen to Steve Wariner now and you can hear the drum machines, and you can hear the real sterile metallic sounding Stratocaster, which would be the active EMG pickup thing, which was huge at the time, plugging straight into the rack and then straight into the console. And that was the tone. And so you had that, or solid state Roland jazz chorus stuff. But Steve was the guy who was singing and playing. He was playing leads, and very well. He's kind of a jazz guy, and he's kind of a rock guy. He's kind of a country guy. He's kind of a bluegrass guy. And then he was singing and writing songs. And so, maybe not the biggest influence on me just artistically, but definitely who is the person that I can kind of remember doing it first or earliest. It'd probably be Steve Wariner. And then, of course, there's other influences that you sort of find out that are more akin, that more speak to you. But he's the first for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So was that like a high school or college thing? When did he come into? Yeah, Steve Wariner.
Oh no, Steve was. I'm 6 years old, and I'm listening to Mom's cassettes in the car, and hearing songs like Linda and The Weeknd and his earlier stuff. And so this idea, and then learning and seeing him on TV and seeing him standing up there being front and center with a Strat and singing these songs, and then during a solo, just making it look real effortless and real, nothing crazy flashy. Like at the time, Albert Lee was kind of on the scene, flashing all over the country stuff. And then, of course, you had Brent Mason, who came just after in the late 80s, early 90s. Mm-hmm. But again, just guitar players. And Steve was the guy who was out there front and center. And then shortly after Steve, being a Texan, you eventually are going to run into Stevie Ray Vaughan somewhere. You're just going to trip over a rock, and it's Stevie. And so then there's Stevie, who, like Steve, is singing and playing, and it's a Strat. But Stevie is more this personality, and he's more this flamboyant Texan, and he's wearing cowboy boots, and he's got his initials on the guitar, and he's got, a very flamboyant feather in his hat, and he's got the scarves, and he kind of looks like Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, but more Texan. And then, of course, his sound was, his ability to just play for 60 seconds of a solo and then go right back into singing more of a grittier, less polished type of blues and whatnot. And so then you compare and contrast Steve and Stevie. No, that's kind of funny, Steve and Stevie. But you compare and contrast Steve and Stevie, and it's like, okay, here's Steve Wariner, kind of polished, kind of neat, clean cut, clean playing, kind of Knopfler-esque. And then you got Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's just ripping. Yeah. And kind of in the Johnny Winter style, kind of in the Albert King style. And so then when you hit Stevie, then the world opens up and you start to see how the roots spread far down into the singer, guitar player, person as one guy.
Yeah. Man, that makes a lot of sense. So one thing that we've been talking about a lot on this podcast is how a lot of the people that are being interviewed are kind of from the small town. So what do you think it is about people being from small towns that just give them almost an edge when they branch out? Because a lot of the guys that we've talked to have just been from, the small towns in the coastal bend, and then they've moved to a bigger place where they stick out. So what do you think it is? Like, I like to get everybody's take.
I think there are three things to think about with that. I think number one, small town, boredom. In terms of your individual musicianship, you are sitting alone at home. If you're musical, typically in rural America, you're sitting at home by yourself because, if you're not out drinking and hanging with your friends at the, in the parking lot, or if you're not doing sports, and if you're not interested in rural things like typical rural ranching or fishing and stuff like that, you're going to be sitting at home pretty much by yourself until you can find a few other people to hang with. And so you're just bored and you're digging down deep. You got all this time on your hands, and it's like, what are you going to do with this time? And there was a period where I was grounded for a semester, and my parents said, you can't play in the band anymore and you can't drive, but we're not going to take your guitar away. So it's like, well, that made that easy because I wasn't playing video games anymore by that point, and what else did I have to do? So I think the small town thing, at its core, it's boredom and just time on your hands. Um, the second thing I would say, contrasting that, is if you're from a big city, it's kind of easy to be crushed under the weight of some of that. Like, if you're from the big city, you do have the chance for more like political connections, like knowing someone here or knowing someone there. Your dad or your dad might run front of house for someone, or your uncle might have played piano for someone, and that's what you hear around in Nashville all the time.
Yeah.
My dad played for so and so during this set of years, or my uncle was the front of house for so and so during this section of their career. And so you have that potential with living in a city like Nashville. But the flip side to that is the pressure is on you even more to not be distracted by getting by on hanging with your dad who might be doing well, or hanging with your uncle who might be doing well. Because then you kind of, it's a weird trade-off, because you see some guys who get to hang with their influences, right?
Yeah.
And so that's awesome. Like, if you got to grow up around Dan Huff, well, then that's cool. But there's also that expectation of like, man, you got to grow up around someone big or someone famous or someone successful, someone talented. You better do something with it. So, but then the third thing I would say, and I think I lost my train of thought, but as far as small towns go, you're kind of known as the person in your town with the thing. So like, you have the football star, you have the really great swimmer, you have the guy that knocked up so and so, or you have you have this identity that's sort of cast really early on with a nickname or something, like, and so if you're the music guy, or if you're like, oh yeah, so and so, he sings, or he's pretty good at guitar, or I remember hearing him at a party or something like that. And so the benefit is that you kind of get this individualistic cast really young in your life to say like, yes, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I don't do anything else. And then the shell shock that happens is when you leave small towns like I did, you realize that that's not good enough anymore. And it's like, I'm in especially moving here, 1 million people, so it's about like San Antonio roughly.
Yeah.
And but you get here and it's like, you go to a restaurant, a musician is serving you. You go to Starbucks, a barista is a songwriter. You go to a bar, the bartender is a singer aspiring, or and everyone's got an iron in the fire. And so all of a sudden it's like that identity of being the music person, it's like, well, now who are you? Now what do you have to say? Now what are you going to do about it? And some people leave, man. Like in Nashville, there's maybe they call it 5-year town, 10-year town, 2-year town, whatever. At the end of the day, like, you'll either stick it out as long as you can, and as long as you obviously financially can, as long as you can with your reputation of doing good work, as long as you can with your emotional, just constant, like, is this going to be a good month or a bad month? Or is this tour going to get canceled because of a pandemic? Or what are we going to do? And so that's where that tends to, you find out kind of, okay, I said this about myself in a town of 30,000 people. Can I say this about myself in a town of 1 million who, people getting record deals? So I know that's a lot, but ultimately I think you have boredom, and then with the big city, you have the opposite, which is getting lost in all of the busy. And then you have the identity, back to the small town, you have the identity of, can I carry this identity from, Kansas City, Missouri to Nashville? Or can I carry this identity from, Killeen, Texas to Austin, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. Man, that's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's a great segue into talking about your identity as an artist. So you released an EP a couple years ago that was really, really big, and it sounded big. It had some great songs on there. So talk about your like influences with those and where you are now, if you can, because I know you're writing right now. And the last time I spoke to you, you're like, yeah, it's getting ready. So excited about that. But what,
Thank you.
like maybe a little bit of a little interesting stuff about where you were and where you are.
Sure. Well, I had played sideman for a long time, and I still do, because it's a certain skill set to be able to do all that being a sideman requires. But at the same time, when the artist that you're with is taking a break, or is getting married, or is going through something difficult and can't play, you're kind of left, excuse me, out there to figure it out.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I've never been short on people who believed in me and who complimented me and encouraged me to do the thing, be the man, be the artist, be the artist.
Hmm.
And so, round about 2012, I started writing again, and not for other people, but for myself. And one of the artist gigs that I had, she got married, and we were all super happy for her, but she got married. So there was a life change. And so the rest of us in the band were kind of like, what are we going to do now? And so I saw an opportunity in that moment, round about 2013, to be the man, to be the artist. And I did. And so I had some songs, and I kept writing, and I took the band downtown to the bars and the honky tonks, and we worked it out, and got used to playing without her, even though we missed her, and worked up some of my material, and the guys just loved it. And all the people at the time in Nashville that I was connected with kept using this term R&B. Yeah. And some of them even went as far as to compare my sound and my vocal stylings with other R&B singers. Mm. And so then the process of studio shopping began. How do you find a studio that can capture not just you, but like can inspire you and can capture the essence of what it is that you're doing and what it is that people are saying seems to be really what you're good at. So is R&B. And so I started looking around, and I met a guy named Word Strickland, who is a Berklee College of Music grad, and he's a phenomenal guitar player and a sideman and a hilarious guy. He would drive a motorcycle, you'd appreciate this. He drove a Harley downtown. Nice. And would park it in the alley, and he would have his double gig bag and his ampless solution, like a pedal, like a Helix or a Line 6, something. And that was his rig. And he would shred like nobody. Anyway, he connected me with John Gifford, who worked as the main engineer at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Yeah. And so I began to talk to John, and we formed a good friendship over the course of some months. And then eventually I booked some sessions, about 2 weeks worth. And we went down there, and we knocked it out in 4 different groupings. So it was, 3 days here, 3 days here, and so on. And we got, probably 15, 16 songs done. Wow. And then after that, you sit down and you're like, okay, we've got all these songs, but what songs work well together in a package? Because, at the time, I wasn't really thinking in terms of singles. I was thinking like, no, I've got to put these out in a group and make it like an album or make it like an EP or something. And so we picked our 3 or 4 favorites and put them out. And all the press that we got was great. It was fantastic. Like nobody really had a negative thing to say. But then there's this weird reality that hit me especially, which is, as good as it might sound, as much praise as it might have gotten, it didn't get the traction that we had hoped for. Mm. And that happens a lot. And it wasn't any like hard feelings or anything. But the thing is you start asking yourself, well, what went wrong or what didn't happen? And sometimes it's luck. Well, what I found was, while I had all the support to do R&B, what I realized was that when most people look at a 6'2" white guy from Texas with a beard, with some long hair, R&B, classic R&B is not the first thing they think of. You look at someone like Alan Stone from the East Coast, and it's like he looks kind of eccentric but nerdy and kind of cool. But then you hear him, And it's so unabashedly R&B that you're just completely sold. And what that told me, and others, I mean, there's other, you know, white dudes doing R&B and girls, you know, Joss Stone, Michael McDonald, there's tons of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that it's so much a white limitation, but that it was I just wasn't selling it. I couldn't sell it. Like, and that's more of a business reality to come to the conclusion of. It's like, yeah, you're a good guy, but like this people aren't buying what you're selling.
Huh.
And so once I kind of realized that, right about that same time, this dude comes out I just heard of this dude named Chris Stapleton.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Stapleton was like a legend in these parts already because he had been writing songs for everybody. He had a publishing deal. Everyone knew him as the lead singer of this band called the Steel Drivers. And of course, me not being from here, I didn't know this stuff. So I hear Chris Stapleton as a solo act, and I'm like blown away because here he's being soulful. There's some R&B in there. It's stripped down. It kind of sounds like Memphis a little bit. It's kind of greasy.
Yeah.
And yet it's somehow still country-ish. And it just, you know, it blew me away. And then I heard another guy named Jason Isbell, who again, I never heard of before, but he was this legend in the area and here's a funny thing about a side note. I should have known who Jason was because at Fame, at the studio, there were master tapes in the room with his name on them. And I knew that he had recorded there, but it just never, you know, I wasn't looking at a name like Jason Isbell when there was like, you know, Mavis Staples in you know, on the tapes or Alicia Keys on the tapes. Like, I don't know who Jason is at that time when you're seeing that. So anyway, he was the lead singer of a band called the Drive-By Truckers. Mm-hmm. Again, I didn't know that, but now I knew. And so here are these two guys kind of seemingly on the outskirts of what would be considered country music or Nashville country music. And they're singing with so much soul and so much passion and so much fire. And then here's the plus side, and here's where it came together for me. They're both singer guitar players. Jason Isbell, we all know, is you know, he's got a great vintage collection and he's Mr. Guitar Player. And Chris Stapleton keeps it more simple with I think it's like a Jazzmaster, some Jaguar or something through a brown print. And so here's again, two lead singers, songwriters, and guitar players. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure out like what's going on here, and I need to draw some inspiration, not to copy it or anything, but just to like learn something.
Yeah.
And so that's what I started doing. So that is more of where the sound and me as an artist, but that's where the sound has sort of gone.
Nice.
Is more of a, not Texas Southern, but like, you know, the South Southern, but also mixed in with that R&B roots and, you know, the singer guitar player thing with the Nashville twang. You know, it's hard describing like what you're doing because it's better to just let people make their own minds up. But if you're asking about the process of it all, that's how I would say it came about. So that's where I am today. You know, learned a lot of lessons about what people think of when they look at you and what people think when they see you versus when they hear you. And the reality of business is that you have to sell something and all of that. And I don't believe, because I hear it a lot, or people ask the natural question is, do you feel like you've sold out, or do you feel like you're catering or pandering? And the answer is no. The real answer is that I love music and I love being a singer and a guitar player and I love writing songs. And so if the knobs in the studio happen to be turned a little bit of a different way when we start to record, that to me, that's not like changing your art or selling out. That's just dialing in a different sound on your gear.
Yeah.
And that literally is the difference sonically between a record like an Alan Stone record versus like a Chris Stapleton record. The settings are just a little different. Over here on Alan's, it's going to be a little bit, cleaner in this area. And on the Stapleton, it's going to be a little dirtier in this area. And the vocal inflection might be different, but artistically, is it somehow like magically different? No, these are two amazing artists who write and sing, and in Chris's case, he plays. And capturing that in an honest way is really all that finding a studio is about. And, that's why I say it's it's kind of best to let people make up their own minds. But,
Yeah, man, that's cool. So when can we expect maybe some tastings of the new
a
stuff?
single will be put out in October, excuse me, November, the second week of November of this year.
Amazing.
So
Nice, dude.
yeah, we've been sitting on it for a while. Like I said, just, financial constraints of the current climate and everything, but we're still here and we're just getting back to normal or starting to, just like most people.
Yeah, did you record that one at Fame too?
No, that one is not at Fame. That one's actually at a local studio here. So after the Fame situation, Fame from here is about 2.5 hours, which is not bad at all.
Yeah.
You cross over to Alabama and you're pretty much there. And the plus side is that there's a Whataburger nearby. So that's a whole nother conversation. But there's a guy here in town named Will who is from Chicago, moved down here, and I used to see Will at my gigs at the Tin Roof and Bourbon Street Blues and Boogie Bar in Printer's Alley. And he was this kind of long, gangly dude with glasses, kind of a hipster looking guy, but really into guitar and really into music. And I'd always see him at all the, I'd see him at several of my gigs, but then I also would see him at some of the other shows that I would go watch to see my buddies play. So he and I eventually got to chatting, and he was opening a studio here in town. Nice. In the old Lehman Drug Company building, which is, geographically it doesn't matter to you, but Lehman Drug Company is where Johnny Cash used to get his prescriptions filled.
Nice.
So there's that. But he bought the old Lehman Drug Company building and built a studio on the second floor. And he outfitted it with, some really basics. It's a simple setup, but the console he got, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically this super retro type console. Real simple setup, but man, we went in there for a jam session one night late after NAMM in August of 2017, before he had truly opened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a NAMM jam, a summer NAMM jam. And I was blown away with the space. Number one, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But then secondly, the sounds, like standing in the control room and just hearing what the musicians in the other room were, I was like, this is good. This is really sounding good. And I could totally record here. And to find a local place 15 minutes from me versus driving 2.5 hours, it was like, okay, it's not Fame, but man, if I have to be in Nashville recording, this is it. This is easy. This is easy.
Yeah.
So easy. So we spent a lot of time there through the years since then, and he's doing really well. He does a lot of video content for a lot of different random things. You just have to check out his YouTube presence and stuff.
I've seen a bunch, like who was it? Ariel Posen did a show there, and it was crazy. And so did Julian Lage. Like, that place it looks beautiful, and not only that, but you can fit a crowd down on the first floor and have a nice stage. So it's like, man, that is amazing. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to that. Well, speaking of gear, we're gearheads.
You don't say.
Yeah.
This is where the audience tunes out.
No, we have a big gear community down here, so it's just like, man, we have to talk about gear because you're a great influence on me, and I love to hear.
I know that.
Oh yeah, dude, you always tell me what to buy.
I tell you what to sell, but you don't sell it.
We had Nick in here last 2 weeks ago. Nick Garcia, yeah, and he was saying the same thing to me, and I was like, I'm just relaying stuff I hear from Austin. So
you guys, this is so now I know.
So what's going on with the gear? We have a few different segments, but the house is on fire. What are you grabbing? Everybody's safe. Everybody's safe. What are you grabbing?
Well, if I could grab one guitar, it would be this one, there's nothing inherently vintage or rare about this instrument. It's just a great example for what it is. It's a 1996 Gibson Nashville Custom Shop 335.
Nice.
And I have changed a lot of things about it. Pickups, pots. I've never had it refretted. I've never had to, which is kind of amazing. I've put a Bigsby on it. I've taken the Bigsby off. This thing just can't sound bad.
Yeah.
I think what it was originally was I was watching Austin City Limits years ago, maybe around 2000 or 2001. That's not accurate. It was at Antone's in Austin, and it was 99, and David Grissom was there, and he was playing a red 335, and it didn't look vintage. Obviously, David without a Paul Reed Smith is going to make you go, what? But then, yeah, because, like he's Mr. Paul Reed. But then, it was a red 335, and so automatically I liked red 335s because he's just, incredible player. And then I managed to find something on the internet back then, or it was a magazine interview somewhere, and it said it was a 96 or 7 Gibson Custom Shop Nashville 335.
Wow.
And when I say Nashville, it just means built in Nashville, not Memphis. So at that point I knew, okay, reissue guitars can't be that bad if he's using one. And I think you even had a reissue Fender, and it was a great guitar, so I knew that wasn't bad. You see reissues all the time. And so I found this one on, and this is like a shame to admit, but this was actually an eBay purchase. And the guy had an error in the listing.
Oh.
And so I was able to get this guitar for $1,800, which is no small amount, but for one of these, for a Nashville 335, that is unheard of, because now brand new, I think they might be $7,000 or something like that.
Yeah. Anything custom shop was like always top tier.
Yeah. Like it wasn't like it was a heritage series or a custom classic series. Because I think Gibson had the 1960 T Les Paul or 1960 Les Paul, which was supposed to like give you the impression of a 1960 Les Paul, but it didn't. I mean, as a kid in Guitar Center, you're gonna go for whatever, but then you start to figure out little differences and all that. But anyway, I snagged this one off the internet. A guy in Arizona had it, so when I got it, it was so dry and cracked. I mean, it's still got the checking on the binding, but the fretboard was dry as a bone. I think I took this rusted strings off of it and just threw oil on that fretboard for a week, and it just drank it up.
Wow.
And then I finally put some strings on it, let it get set to the climate that I was in, set the neck, and kind of set the twisting of the neck and then all that stuff, and just kind of put a rough setup on it and played it, strummed a chord, and I was like, well, this is great. Like, this is perfect. This sounds exactly like some of those old Grissom sounds that I had heard on the Storyville records and live. And so over the years, I've just tweaked it as you get into it more. So I mean, I've had Lawler low winds in here. I've had Lindy Freyland's in here. I've had the Lindy Freyland True 60s, which was the collab with what's that company called? They do all the wiring and stuff in Kentucky. What'd you say?
Emerson?
No, Lindy Freyland did a collab called the True 60 with RS Guitar Works.
RS. Okay,
yeah. And I even tried some of those single coil the humbucker size single coils, mixing and matching, just playing with it. And then I came across a guy named Tom Holmes who lives in Joelton, Tennessee, which is probably an hour away or so. And I heard the myth, this is going back so internet old school. You're talking like HarmonyCentral.com.
Daddy's Junkie Music.
yeah. Not Torres, but what was the other one? There was Torres had a forum, but then there was some other one that's not around anymore. Anyway, so dudes were talking about how this guy like got the original winding machines from Gibson back when Gibson left the Northeast or the North and came down here. And so that was the story. And everyone who had his pickups swore by him. And I came across a set used and put them not in this guitar, but I put them in a Les Paul. And it was like, yes. By this point, I had heard enough vintage Les Pauls to kind of make the comparison where old Les Pauls don't really sound like humbuckers as we think. They actually sound like single coils, just a little
Yes.
bigger and without the hum. So it's almost like, you think of the term humbucker, and it makes a lot of sense if you can kind of rewind the clock in your mind to a time when they were winding pickups and then they sort of like wound a little bit different way, a little extra figure eight pattern or whatever it's supposed to be, and took the hum out and they were done. And they didn't wax pot them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they had to wind them really tight and make sure all the parts fit really well together so that there was no, micro vibrations in there and all that kind of stuff. And, so that windings wouldn't move around and possibly break. Cause that wire they wind with is like, it's not even like dental floss. It's like super. But, so that was my first set of homes. And after that, I was like, okay, I should try and get some more of these. And the wait was really, really a long time from him, but kind of like people do now with Analog Man King of Tones, I just emailed his wife and said, hey, I need some pickups. This is what I want. This is what I need. How long is the wait? She goes, oh, I don't know, but we'll just let you know when Tom can get back. He's been really sick. And I said, okay, no problem. And maybe, I don't know, 6 months had passed and she emailed me and she said, hey, we've had a lot of people, refuse orders. Do you want your pickups? And I said, well, sure. And she said, okay, well, I've got a few sets, and so I bought them all and put them in every guitar that I had that took humbuckers at the time.
Wow.
And so, I'm a big believer, and I've had other pickups, and there's other great pickups out there. Like, I don't think anything, and this is kind of maybe not the segue or whatever, but I'm kind of the belief that like nothing sucks anymore. It's kind of hard to run across something that just sucks. Like back when we were kids, like you could plug into a pedal and be like, oh God, this sucks, because it just sounded unbearable. Like whatever that piece of equipment did, it was like, why does this suck so bad? It's unbearable at these settings, and you can't use it for anything but like these little bitty settings, and it's okay. But then every other way it sucks. Or, this amplifier sucks because it constantly breaks, or this amp sucks because, it's got too much high end, or this guitar sucks because it's too blah, blah, blah. Like very few things like actually suck anymore. And so now we're getting into an age into with the internet and how all of that has worked, with forums and pages and Reverb giving a lot of content and Pro Guitar Shop doing demos. Yeah. We're getting into this age now where I think people are hair splitting over very, very, very fine details that I think when you add them up matter. But I think if you don't know how to put those details into a context, you're going to miss why these things don't suck. You're going to miss why does a tube screamer not suck? Well, because like when your amp is cranked and you hit that pedal, it's going to give it a boost in the mids, and it's going to, have a little soft clipping, but it's also going to help take some of that bass away so that your amp isn't like farting and flubbing. That's why a tube screamer doesn't suck. But to say like to someone who's never played through a loud amp, why does a tube screamer not suck? They're going to say, oh, it's transparent, it's smooth, everyone's used it. Well, that's hardly an analysis. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
But you gotta, people have to learn these things. And so I would say that for me, the Holmes thing, it wasn't just about Holmes or anything like that. It was like for the first time in my life, I heard a humbucker that A, reminded me of the vintage Les Pauls that I had gotten personally to mess with. And B, it was the first time I'd heard a humbucker that didn't sound like it was kind of covered up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so you learn, why is that? Well, wax potting is a thing. And you learn about the thinness of the covers, and you learn about magnet types, and you learn about winding counts and winding thread thickness. And it's like, okay, I've kind of got the basics, but I'm not going to obsess over it. I just know that I really like this thing. And now, man, you can get great vintage sounding pickups from tons of people. You know,
Yeah.
Fralin still is one of the best, I think. I had Fralin, those True 60 Fralins. I had those for, I know I kind of sound like I undersold it, but I think I had those for like 5 years. And that was all that I had for a long time. I had 3 sets of those. And you know, what was the other? Lollers. I had those. I had Lollers for 6 years.
Yeah.
You know, I had Lollers for a long time, the low winds, and they were clear and they sounded fine. You know, so for me, it's just been a hair splitting. You kind of inch a little closer every once in a while to a sound in your, you know, you plug into your cable every day, and then someone loans you their cable and you're like, well, that sounds a little bit better. I'm going to get 5 of these and throw all my old cables away or sell them. And so that's kind of like how it happens. You know, it's like when people hear a King of Tone for the first time, they're like, well, that sounds better than 5 of the overdrives I have. Why is that? Well, it sounds more open and it doesn't have the mid thing that most people actually don't like, even though you should, I think. You know, little things like that. It's like, oh, that's why that sounds better. And the confusion, I think, happens when you run into a gear company that's scarce in number with their production, or it's just got a long waiting list. And in the case of analog, man, it's all work. That hype is real. I've had 3 King of Tones, and every single one of them was great. But like with Spaceman's one.
Yeah.
Limited numbers, so you're like forced to make a decision. It's like, oh my God, do I do this? Do I not do this? It's $350 right now, or it could be $800 in 6 months.
Yeah.
What do I do? And so you're forced to make this decision, and then you get the pedal in. Let's say you bought it new. You get your pedal in, and you're kind of like forcing yourself to see the beauty in it and to see the utility in it. Never mind that they look gorgeous. And most of those Spaceman, in fact, every Spaceman I've ever played sounded amazing. But not every company is like Spaceman, where everything that they put out in limited number actually matches the hype. Like, it's worth the hype with some of it, but not all of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the online and the internet and the dudes who maybe don't get to play as much, they might be at a slight disadvantage, because it's like they just know that they've got these pieces of gear by name or by Instagram look. But it's like, okay, but what are you doing with that?
Yeah.
And as a guitar person yourself, I'm sure you see that sometimes, at least. I mean, I just know what I like, and I know what I've sold more gear than I ever thought I would own. I can't even put a number on it. It's embarrassing. But I've honed it down now to where I don't have a pedal drawer. I don't have a closet full of amps or a cartage company full of amps anymore. I don't have closets full of guitars like some people I know. And it's because I know what I really like, and I know it's my easy go-to, and I can just go and grab it, right?
Yeah. So. I feel like Texas players, especially with the Stevie thing, is we like to be different. We like to have our sound. That's always been. So how close are you to finding like your, like, this is me, like it or not? This is me.
I'm very, very happy to report that I believe I am there.
Nice.
Or maybe a tweak or two. You know, something comes out occasionally though.
Yeah. And
you gas for it. And I haven't gassed in I'm talking, I haven't gassed in, I feel like I'm like, you know, I'm an addict, and it's been 1,600 days since my last. But here's the deal: some stuff has come out recently that has made me gas, not because I feel like I need it, like as artistically or to get my ideal sound, but there's some toys out there, that are kind of like, why you got to make that pedal in limited numbers and make me pay for it on the secondhand market? The first thing that comes to mind. Well, first of all, you asked about my sound. So my sound, absolutely. My sound, as far as the gear list would go, is 2 amplifiers. There's 3, but I currently don't have one in my possession anymore. I sold it to a friend of mine here, a songwriter guy. 3 amps. My 68 super bass plexi, 50 watt.
Mm-hmm.
My 93 Diaz CD100, which, you know, is, and you're giggling. you're like, which has the reverb and the trim on it, which not all of them did. And the third amp, which I do not have in my possession anymore, is a 58 Tweed Twin low power. Mm. Between those 3 amps, that is it for me. Like, that's it. I've burned through, you know, I've been through every Fender in the book. Silver, black, brown, tweed. I've been through almost every one they ever made. Marshalls, same thing. You know, the Vox thing, never. I love so much British music, but it's like, I listen to British music more like as a big picture. So when I put on like, let's say Elbow or Oasis or the Rolling Stones. Well, the Rolling Stones don't count because they do use tweeds. Yeah. But like Lenny Kravitz and he's not necessarily British, but he basically is. The Beatles, like that's all that Vox thing. And I've never really identified, like John Jorgensen, the session player, plays for Elton John, and he's actually on this poster back here.
Nice.
He was known for the Vox thing. And it's like, I love Jorgensen's playing. I love every part he's ever written for every song he's ever been on. I like his tone. I love his tone. I think he's one of the greatest players alive. But it's like, does that make me want a Vox? No, because I just don't like Voxes with my hands and my sound and the way that I play. And I've never had a gig where like the Vox was like required, you know. I've had a couple of Trainwreck clones. And they were awesome, but like, I just, you know, whenever I took a good long look at it, I was like, okay, it's nice to have the Trainwreck, which is the modded Vox thing, but it's just like, man, I don't know. So I kind of put a few feelers and sold the Trainwrecks to a friend of mine here in town who loves it, you know? Nice. But yes, but anyway, so that's my sound. And then anything with, you know, a Les Paul or a 335, any Gibson guitar is going to be it for me. I have a couple of Fenders, but, you know, you said the Stevie thing. Okay, so, I mean, you're from Texas and you focus on your sound, but at the same time, if you walk into a bar with a Strat, at least when we were growing up, it was already assumed what you were going to be doing. And it's like, oh, who's this kid, punk, Stevie Ray wannabe with his sunburst Strat or his black Strat? You walk in with a Strat and it's immediately assumed. And I think that someone like, you know, Ian Moore did a great job of fighting that every step of the way with his songwriting and his singing and his playing. You know, he had the Strat body, but it was a telly neck. Yep. And he had cool rails in the bridge, I think, right? Is that what it was?
Something crazy. Something you wouldn't expect.
I think it was the cool rails, maybe. But yeah, so, and then he was plugged into either a super reverb or a matchless or what else? I don't even know. Yeah. But like he fought that. If you think about like his songwriting and his singing and his playing, he fought the stereotype of being a white Austin blues guy at every stage of the way. So it's like props to him. Like that was hard to do. Yeah. And he did it. And then I guess, you know, he got tired of it, but like, I love that guy and I love what he stood for. But, you know, I don't know, gear wise, you mentioned toys. It's like, well, Chase Bliss is doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't own a single one of their pedals, but I wish I could get my hands on a Generation Loss and play with it. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but that thing is got a feature set on it that I've never seen before. Yeah. It can turn your sound really lo-fi. It can turn it warbly like a record with the artifacts, like a vintage vinyl with the artifacts thing. They advertise it as a VHS tape simulator, but it can do like really weird chorus vibratos, lo-fi, static. Um, and then, you know, coupled with all the little dip switches and stuff, it's like I would love to just be in a studio situation, if nothing else, with that pedal and writing little hooks, or not hooks, but like writing little parts, like having like a comp day where you're just doing parts for a few hours
Yeah, yeah,
and just
yeah.
use that here and there. Like that's where that pedal would be fun. I don't know. I mean, is there anything that you see lately that like you're just kind of that makes you go, hmm?
Man, the last time that that happened was the Volante, and I'm
Yeah,
still digging into the Volante. You know what I mean?
same.
Still kind of like finding like, oh man, this thing's deep. But you touched on it earlier, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I feel like fuzz is a journey. Like it's a you know what I mean? Like I started with a big muff, and
Okay.
I remembered plugging it in and just literally like saying, what? Like I thought this was going to make me sound like Santana because he played a big, and it
Right.
wasn't. So we had this segment called "What's in the Box." So we
Oh
have a
boy.
box in front of me, and I'm gonna open the box, and we're gonna talk about whatever's in the box.
Do you
So
know what's in the box?
I know it's in the box, and I picked it just for you, which
Oh,
is
fun.
funny
Okay.
because you talked about it already, and of course it's fuzz, but
Hey, spaceman.
Spaceman Sputnik 1. And, you know, I thought who better to talk about fuzz than Austin because it's a journey. And I've seen you go through, you know, your fuzz journey, and I've been through a fuzz journey, and it's very confusing. So, if you had a younger player, say we do have a few younger listeners, how would you describe fuzz? How would you tell them to use it? Like, give us some like, you know, somebody that has some miles on fuzz. Give us some insight.
Well, that's a very philosophical way of putting the fuzz thing. That's but fuzz pedals as an effect has been a journey, you know, historically in the pedal world, and any pedal maker will tell you that.
Yeah.
Even though the core of it's the same. I think younger guys will have heard the White Stripes and Jack White. I think younger guys will have heard the Black Keys
Mm.
and Dan Auerbach. Um, who else comes to mind? Even some of just the more lo-fi sounding music, like your Amy Winehouse was
Mm.
very kind of funky and whatever. El King is more of a modern interpretation of that. Um, and so I think fuzz currently what we're seeing is the hallmark of like very indie sounding music.
Mm.
And because of the internet and because of Spotify and all of that, indie music is having a heyday right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I am here for it because to me, as a songwriter, the best songs are usually written by these people. And they are the most adventurous production wise. They are the explorers production wise. They will explore the space. They'll be the ones to go buy the new Strymon pedal tomorrow or tomorrow,
Today.
and tweak with every knob until it sounds completely whacked out, and they'll have a great song with that on the track. They're going to be the first ones to do it. You know, the Volante a little more straightforward. So, but that's the thing is like because indie music and indie pop is having such a heyday right now. We are getting to hear lots of great fuzz textures, and Josh Scott at JHS, I feel like the dude never misses a chance to talk about fuzz in some way. And he's right, because I think Josh is roughly, you and I are kind of in his similar age group. And he did an episode on the love pedal stuff.
Yeah.
Or no,
Okay.
excuse me, love tone.
Love tone. Love tone. Yeah. Meatball.
Well, I've been through all those pedals because I went through a love tone phase from Hades, and I loved every single pedal they made. The brown source was not meant to be a fuzz, but it's kind of fuzzy. It's not very compressed. The cheese source was the combination of the two, so it was the big cheese with that selector switch on it. So you've got like that kind of thing. So I would say to a younger person, you know, figure out, you know, what are you listening to? Because it ain't just Hendrix anymore, and it ain't just David Gilmour anymore. You know, for guys like our age and older, it's going to come down to Hendrix and Gilmour. So you're going to look at the big muff stuff. You're going to look at the fuzz face stuff. And then all the iterations of those two. And yeah, because there's a lot. So like the Pete Cornish stuff is basically just a really fancy big muff with some tweakability. The P2 is what I think it's called. The Analog Man Sun Face is basically a clone of a fuzz face, not sun face fuzz. Yeah, that's what it's called. And I have a sun lion here that's got the fuzz face on one side, and then the Beano boost, which is just a treble booster, on the other side. And both of those are like fuzz, circuits just in one box. But my fuzz journey started off with listening to Hendrix. And I think that's a lot of us. And then you hear like the David Gilmour stuff, like I mentioned, and it's pretty searing, but it's also smooth.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it's like, some of those live Stevie cuts are very brittle on the top end.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's fuzz, but I don't think it is. I think it's just the amp. I think it's the high end of the amp distorting the microphones that's recording it. But shoot, I mean, I'm trying to think, like late 90s was all Marshall and Mesa. Early 2000s was all early Mesa and Diesel and VHT and then Bogner. Country has never really been fuzz friendly. Country music has never really capitalized on that, I don't think. If a distorted amp does not count as fuzz, like we're talking about that. So it's like, but then I remember hearing Thick Freakness by the Black Keys, and I was like, this is awesome. It's like a blues album is what it is, man. It was like, dude, Thick Freakness is a great album. Super fuzzy, super vibey. Doyle Bramhall, of course, kind of reviving the blues fuzz spirit. John Mayer recorded that track on one of his albums, The Crossroads, which was very pinched fuzz. He kind of brought that to the mainstream, blues guys with that. But yeah, I mean, I would just say, you can get really cerebral about it, but, silicone, germanium, and then all the little different transistors and diodes in between. But what are your influences? Who are you trying to sound like? Be honest with yourself. Who do you want to copy?
Yeah.
And because we all trying to copy somebody, it's at least sometimes. And then from there, as a player, as a working musician, ask yourself, okay, where does this fit in the context of what I'm doing as a sideman? Or if you're an artist, is this what I'm trying to achieve? Because I can tell you, like, the fuzz face, the Sun Lion, is never turned on when I'm doing a sideman gig. And I refuse to pull it off the board because that's like, I like it.
Yeah.
The only way I could see myself using it live with another act, another artist, is if I was running into a more of a rock type setting and I needed a solo sound, a lead sound that had a little bit of extra, more like top end hair on it. Mm. But that's super rare because most of the time they just want the sound is to sort of push the mids forward a little bit, which, there's pedals that do that too. Uh-huh. But yeah, just be honest with yourself about your influences. Look at the guitar they're playing and look at the amp they're playing and listen to the songs too. Like, if they're doing a lot of like staccato stuff, like the John Mayer Crossroads thing, okay, that's your pinched fuzz thing. But if it's more like, Hendrix doing, that's more, that you're getting to hear more of the decay of each strum, and you're getting to hear, that beats, You know what I mean? Oops. Sorry, I lost you. Okay. But yeah, that's to me, listen to the timbre of the instrument and all that stuff. And so,
well, for
be honest about your influences, because there's tons of fuzzes out there.
Yes.
I just don't know.
Ocean of fuzz.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, I would be curious to try a big muff again at some point, or a muff style. The JHS Muffalata, that seems fun because it's like all the muffs in one pedal, and that's fun. I know guys that have that pedal on their board, studio guys, session guys, and it's got some very usable sounds in there. But I don't know. I don't what. So you're rocking the Sputnik. Is that on the board?
This was my grail. So I put this on my small rock and roll board. So like just dirty, just the old like gnarly big sound that I want to play. And then I put the Sputnik 3 on my actual like board that I take out because I'm like, if anything happens to that one, it's going to be at bars. If it gets a beer spilled on it, I can replace it. This one I can't replace, so it goes like on my small like.
So you have two different Sputniks.
Yeah. The 1 and then the 3. The 2 is like, it's like the compressor. It's the compressor size, so it's like huge. And I took off my Cali, the big Cali, because it was just so huge. So same idea. I'll never get a 2.
Shocked. Where is that pedal?
The Cali?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the studio. Once I saw the prices where they are, I think I saw a Reverb sold one this week for $2,000. I was like, I spent $500 on that pedal. It's gonna be in the studio.
$450 on mine, and I had 3 of them, and I'm like, it was great sound. I have the slide rig, but that's 2 compressors.
Yeah.
So, like I'm using it only for. I don't have a slide up here. I only use it for slide stuff, and it's perfect.
Nice.
It's perfect. But like I had a Spaceman Mercury 3.
Oh man.
That's my favorite one that I ever had. And I don't, here's the thing, like, I know why I liked it, but I don't know why the market likes it so much. Like, because to me, it's a selective color boost. So you pick the color, the EQ curve, that is, you pick your color with the 1 through 5. You pick the amount with your knob to turn the output up or down. And then you have the harmonics knob, which is like the most subtle knob ever put on a pedal I think I've ever heard. So like I know why I liked it, because I was using it as a boost for an amp. Occasionally I would use it as a boost for another pedal, but I don't like stacking pedals. I'm not that guy at all. So I quickly got, that's why in fact I sold it, was because I was like, I can boost with another pedal. And I'm not stacking anything because stacking for me sucks. So it's like, what do I need this for? The prices were going up. I bought it for $450, $500, and I think I sold it for like $750, $800.
Nice.
But now the Mercury 3s, though, people want $1,200 for them things, and it's just like, it's the Spaceman rarity. I more than anything, it's a great sounding pedal. But I think the Spaceman collectible crew, sort of gets off on, I got to put my collection together. And so then the Mercury 3 is always this one that, a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
But the Mercury, 4 is supposedly out there now.
Yeah. He made a few iterations, which he said he'd never make a Sputnik 3. He swore he'd never do it, and then just kind of like snuck it in. He snuck it in with an envelope filter. So if you got it on the secret mission, he sent out 10 Sputnik 3s and 10 envelope filters. And people were like, well, I wish I would have gotten the filter. And some people were like, I wish I would have gotten the Sputnik. But now they're readily available. So you can go pick one up fairly reasonably, way more reasonably than the Sputnik one. So, but hey,
so what does the Sputnik one sound like?
So we A-B'd them really close, and it was like, they're they're pretty close. But the difference in the 3 is that it has the momentary drift function. So remember so it goes crazy. It goes crazy and just oscillates in weird ways. So on the old Sputnik, the drift function is either on or off. So it's one of these switches. On the 2, he put it on an actual switch, and on the 3, he just made it smaller and you can momentary it if you want to, which is kind of
Okay.
cool. You can just go crazy, balls to the wall, like just instantly.
So is that like, would you use that in a rock context, like hard rock, or how would you? Okay.
Yeah, so one of our new songs, it has a heaven ending and a hell ending, and the hell ending has Sputnik, and the heaven ending is just real nice.
That's creatively very cool. A heaven or a hell ending. That's
Yeah,
clever.
but hey, let me ask you this: for those that don't know, perfect pitch, blessing or a curse,
Well,
especially playing with so many people.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, it helped me in high school when I was competing in voice because I could hear down the hall what key the sight reading was in. I know.
Whoa! You just blew
So
my mind. You just blew
yeah,
my
see,
mind.
so you would sing your selection, or you would play or sing your selection piece, the 20, however many measures it was, and then after that, there's a sight reading portion, right? And so I'm like, they call your group up, and you're in the hall, and you're listening down the hall, and I'm over here, and I'm listening to whoever sing it, and I'm like, oh, okay, key of A, and I'm thinking, all right, put my brain in that mode, of looking at this, because as high school, you can be a great sight reader in high school, but you can always get better. So I'm thinking, okay, key of A, and I'm listening down the hall, and I'm like, okay, it has a couple of jumps, So yeah, it was an advantage there. It's been embarrassing to me in a couple of settings, or you could say savior too, but embarrassing / savior in some group ensembles. So like college vocal groups, the choir director blows the wrong pitch on the pitch pipe, and give them kind of a weird look, or something, and he'll yeah. And that happened many times. My first time with it, though, I got in trouble. I was in choir in high school. I didn't want to be in choir in high school, by the way, but I
Oh,
had to have a fine art credit. This is my first year. And we were singing this song by Morton Lordson called Set Me as a Seal, key of D. And at the end of it, it has this very low, for the basses, it has a low D. So if you're a guy in high school hitting this low D, you think you're hot stuff. So anyway, the conductor goes to the keyboard and rolls up a D flat major chord. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm like new. I'm like been in choir a month, and I'm looking around like this, and everyone's like ready to go. And I'm thinking, what piece are we singing? Are we singing Set Me as a Seal? Like, he said we were singing Set Me as a Seal, but that's not D. That's not a D major. What are we doing? And so no kidding, he gets through the first measure and stops conducting and looks at me, and he says, what's the problem? Why are you not singing? And I said, I just didn't know what we were singing. I'm sorry. He goes, I said, pull out Set Me as a Seal by Morton Lordson. I said, no, I heard, you didn't play a D major chord on the keyboard. And he goes, and everyone by this point is looking at me and kind of like, what? Like, you can hear it. And he's like, and he gets real like weird. He goes, how the hell did you know that? And I'm like, I'm looking around. I look at my buddy John standing next to me. I look at, this dude in the tenor section. I'm looking over here. I'm like, isn't that, I was like, and I literally said that. So I said, isn't that what we do here? And he goes, you're going to stay after class today. We're going to have a talk. And I was like, oh God. And he goes to me and he closes the door and he goes, so how the heck did you know I didn't play a D major? Like, all happy.
yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. Isn't that, like I said, isn't that what we do here? And he's like, no, but how did you know? And I said, I don't understand now what we're talking about. He goes, come here. Takes me to the keyboard. He says, what note is this? Bing. I tell him, bang, bong, bang. He does this for like a minute. He's like, oh, okay, so you have relative pitch. And I'm like, great. It wasn't until I was tuning a guitar by ear that I figured out that it was within 2 hertz. Like, my ability to discern was about 2 hertz or thereabouts. And so that's how I found out I had it. Blessing or curse, though, I mean, shoot, dude, I don't know. here's where it's bad, is if I'm playing in a sideman situation and I get to the gig, like let's say it's a gig, like it's a one-off, like I'm the hired guy, whatever.
Yeah.
I've learned the whole set or whatever it is, all their songs, and they say, oh yeah, by the way, we tuned down a half a step. And I'm like, well, damn, like I spent the last like 3 days listening to not just the songs and not just the progressions and not just the hooks, but I'm also like, what goes into the choice of a key, like there's a feel with every key. Like I know that like A is brighter than A flat, or, you know, G is different than, there's just, you know, there's little differences, not like colors or auras or any weird stuff, but like there is something that goes into a key that contributes to the feel of how a song will feel. And you know, I don't know any other way to say it than that. Like whenever you listen to like Hendrix's Machine Gun Man, he's playing it in the E position, but his guitar is tuned down a whole step. And you can hear it if you take your Strat and you tune your Strat down a whole step to where E becomes D, technically. You will hear, and you start playing, you'll hear the slack in the strings that Hendrix has. You'll hear the color in the sound. So when he hits that, you know, but it's, and that univibe is going and all the sound is swirling around. You're like, this is hypnotic. I think a lot of that feel does come from the key that you choose, you know?
Yeah.
So it can be a challenge when someone says like, you know, the song we're playing, you know, is, and I've learned it that way, and I've learned the riff, and I've learned the lick, and I've learned the feel. Oh, by the way, we tuned down a half step. So I'm like, I have two choices. I can tune my guitar down a half step to play everything in root position, or I can be the a-hole and not tune down, but just put my hands in a different spot. So a lot of times that's what I do. I don't actually tune down. I just, and I'll just move my hands. And so they're like, okay, you know, you remember this song? It's E, D, A, F. And it's like, I'm just like, don't say anything because I'm transposing right now. You don't know what I'm doing, you know? And occasionally I've been called out for it. Like, why don't you just tune down? Why don't you just tune down, bro? And I'm like, you don't understand. I don't know. I just can't. I just don't want to.
So is 3 days the usual when somebody calls you, boom, 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 the guitar player, Austin, hey man, how many days is the typical, and how many songs is the typical, like, you know?
So right now I'm working on a 2-hour show as a sideman that's happening tomorrow night, and I found out about it yesterday morning.
Oh.
It's a 2-hour show. Some of the songs I have heard enough from the artist, like to have a familiarity with.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a fan of hers. Her name is Rachel Horder. She's basically like, if Nashville was to have a version of Ariana Grande, she would be it. Like,
nice.
She's like 5. She's like little short, little skinny, huge voice. Nice. Huge voice, big voice, R&B style. And her normal guy, Seth, is a fantastic player. And he had something, I guess there was a crossing of the wires or whatever. And Rachel and I have a connection just because of our mutual love of R&B. I think she sells it a little bit better than I ever could, but we both love it. And she's seen me do my thing and I've seen her do her thing. So on a 2-hour show, I've had, you know, about roughly, it'll be 3 days by the time we play.
Okay.
And I would say I'm familiar enough with maybe 8 of the songs, so I'm learning the others. Okay. And again, nothing is, you know, we're not talking about crazy challenging, you know, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker. It's a lot of pop, you know, pop music is relatively simple.
Yeah. Okay.
As long as you know, stay ahead of the curve on your own musicianship and try to challenge yourself at all times, or some of the time someone whips out, you know, an hour's worth of pop music that you've never played before. And you can kind of have fun with it because the changes are not complicated. and you can kind of pick the sounds that you want to dial in on your guitar, and then how you're gonna funk with it a little bit. Like I might use an envelope filter here or there just because it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
So, but then other times, like in the Broadway honky tonks and bars and stuff, it's the day of,
Oh, wow.
because musicians even here, where everyone I think is pretty darn serious. Occasionally, you have the dude that calls out that can't do it. I got called an hour before a session yesterday. I got a text at 1 o'clock, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come to the studio and cut this song with us for us?" And I said, "Well, sure, I'd love to. When were you thinking?" And I'm like sweaty from the gym. They're like, how about now?" And I'm like, "It's a 30-minute drive, so I'll be there in about 40 minutes." They said, "Cool, see you then." So they Dropbox me the rough and on my phone, and I'm in the car driving 30 minutes to Music Row, and had 30 minutes to get it in my brain. I get in the studio. It's a working studio. It's a working studio. So it's just a control room. There's no like tracking room. It's one of those smaller situations. And so we go in. I ask, what parts do I need to do? They said, "We need you on all the choruses and the bridge." I said, "Great." And so we listened through, made sure the sound was there, did that. That took about 45 minutes to get everything that they wanted. And then they said, "How about a vocal? How about a background harmony vocal?" Well, by then I've already listened to the song for 45 minutes, on repeat. So it's in there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what are you thinking? I said, "Here's what I hear." And so they said, "Great, do it." And so that was another, 45 minutes. And then afterwards we went to Mexican food and I came home. So, sometimes it's like that. It just depends. But I've been very lucky to, even amongst the environment that we're in, I've played a big show at a brewery down south of town. We were opening for Josh Grayson, who's like some American Idol guy from several years back. We opened for that show, and that was great. So that was outdoors, kind of a festival-like environment, even though there were not as many people as a festival there. Did a bar gig, did a private party gig in Minnesota last weekend. So that was 18 hours up and then 18 hours back in the van. And then this week, studio session last minute. And then tomorrow night will be a winery with Rachel for a 2-hour show there. And so you just kind of try to be nimble and be flexible. And I would say I never say no to anything unless I just can't do it. If I'm physically not playing or here, I just never say no to anything. And, I've been very lucky to be called and to do a lot of different things. And obviously being a singer helps some when you're a sideman.
Yeah.
Play rhythm, play lead, play some colorful parts, and then you can sing harmony. And you're not a druggie or a drunk or something. You just present, be a nice person, and I think it works out really well.
Yeah. So you touched on my next question. My next question was having to do with keeping so it's easier to be a guitar player, and if you're not feeling well, still do the gig. How do you do it as a vocalist? Because different environments. You grew up in South Texas where Pollen was like a mass murderer of vocalists. So how do you keep up that because I'm sure you have to be you are a top tier singer, but you have to bring your top tier singing in addition to your top tier playing. How do you keep up with it all? Because your schedule seems like it can change in a moment's notice.
It did. When we got to Minnesota, it was 35 degrees at night when we got into town.
Oh my gosh.
And the tops of the trees were already starting to turn red there.
Oh, wow.
In case you don't know, everywhere else in the country but South Texas has 4 seasons. And so
we just have
things
summer.
go through this cycle of birth and death. The plants birth and die once a year each. So so basically I get to Minnesota. It's 35. We get out of the van. To get gas in Rockford, Illinois, and grab a Chicago style pizza, by the way, which that was great.
Nice.
And we're out of the van. We're like, it is flipping cold up here. It was like 50 there. And we were like, holy God. We get back in the van, we're eating, we're driving. We get to the place where we're staying. It's 2 a.m. and it's 35. I look at my phone, it's 35 degrees. And it's like, I don't even know. So I get in the room and I'm feeling a little something in here, in my nasal cavity and in the back of my nose. And I wanted to sneeze. And that's the trick, like little pro tip. If you have to sneeze, try to resist it. Because once you sneeze, that's the floodgate opening right there. And your tissue is exposed. You're literally, when you sneeze, yes, it's a reaction, but then you inflame this right here behind here. And that's when the pores open up and all the receptors open up. So it can kind of be a runaway train.
Okay.
So if you can resist it, one of the things that I do is I'll get some like tissue paper and I'll just wet it and jam it in my nostrils to keep from sneezing. Anyway, that's not what you asked. That's just what I did the other night.
Hey, it works.
I would say personal health, hydration. I know this, you hear people say it a lot, but I think in my experience, hydration has been key to so many things. Even with girls, girls look at each other and say, oh, your skin looks so beautiful. What are you doing? And they'll say, oh, I just use this, but I just drink a lot of water. I mean, it's just staying hydrated is the foundation for so much. I found for me as a singer and as just a human being. So once you stay hydrated, then from there, it's just about, how susceptible are you to allergies or diseases. Whenever I moved away from Texas, I was living in Northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks, and it was very different there. It was very dry, and there was a lot of trees and things I had never been used to. And so a friend of mine said, oh, you need to get you some local honey. Huh. And I was like, what kind of hoodoo voodoo crap is this? Like, what else are you selling? But it was actually kind of interesting. I put some honey on, I got a jar of local honey from there and put it in some tea and drizzled it on some biscuits over the months and just kind of found ways to ingest some honey. And the following allergy season, I didn't have any issues, and I didn't really have any issues after that. So when I moved here, I was like, I ought to try and find some honey again. Maybe it was just a fluke, but maybe it's a thing. Well, now we know that's kind of a thing. It's, science might be sketchy, but it does seem to work for a lot of people. It has worked for me. And so I've got some honey laying around, which helps, periodically, but it's not like an elixir. As far as the gigs though, I mean, technically speaking, like on a Broadway cover set, honky tonk bar gig, that's going to be a 3.5 hour gig with no breaks usually.
Oof.
For the front man. Now, if you have a great band, you can sneak away for 10 minutes while they play, or maybe your bass player can play a song and sing a song or something, and you can get away for 10 minutes. But what I learned with all of that was to approach the longer bar gigs a little differently, not to, and this sounds kind of like tacky, but not to give 100%. You can't give 100% like 3.5 hours worth. I found that if I withheld and gave like 75%, 80%, in terms of that physical body energy, in terms of that going for it on the note type stuff, that helped a lot, staying hydrated during the gig. There, even in bars, there are certain people that are going to buy you drinks. And there are certain things that are not good to drink, at least for me. Beer and wine just not working. They tend to dehydrate me really quickly right here for
Okay.
some weird reason. I like if I was sipping a beer with you right now instead of the coffee, like I would be feeling dry and hoarse and all that stuff. I don't know why beer and wine do that to me.
Okay.
Whereas with something just more simple like tequila, well, I can drink 6, 7. This sounds horrible. Like 6 or 7 shots of tequila in a night, and water too, and be completely fine. And I know that sounds like such a terrible thing to say, but I mean, it's just true for me.
Yeah. Does your clothes fall off when you drink the tequila?
No, I don't. I don't do that. I never have done that, despite all the musician stereotypes that there are. And that song I've played too many times. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I would say vocally, just don't overexert yourself. Learn how to resist the urge to constantly go for it 100%. And it doesn't mean that you're slacking it or you're phoning it in, but you just have to learn how to conserve, I think.
Yeah.
And that's where your great training, it's kind of like pedagogy in general, like with your guitar playing, or if you're a pianist or whatever, it's your pedagogy and your technique that ultimately will get you through the hardest passages or the longest, most stressful gigs. Like even military people, you know, they say, just remember your training, and it's like, just remember your training. Like, stand with your feet even weighted between each leg. You know, don't lean on one side. Even if you're a guitar player, try to resist leaning over to that one side. That way, if you're standing straight, well, then your spine is straight and your diet and all this is straight, and you can breathe easily. And, you know, wear your guitar in a spot that's like not going to pull your back or lean your back, and you know, wear it in a spot that you can actually take a breath and it can move just enough, you know, because we all want to look good in pictures, so we all suck in our stomachs. But pedagogically, as a vocal technique, that's the worst thing you can possibly do.
Yeah.
Because you're immediately setting tension from the beginning. So that's why I say, like, you know, if your technique will save you, and if you're out there slamming your guitar and raking it hard to put on a show, well, you can do that for like a song or 2 or 3, but you still got like hours to go. So try to, you know, keep it a little more relaxed and stuff like that. I don't know.
Man,
that's how I do it.
So much good stuff, dude. So much good stuff. Let me ask you, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to cover?
Well, I think it's important for everybody, musicians, that is. You know, we're a very fortunate bunch to be able to even consider this as a career option. You know, I think that if you're a musician, you know, you always should be thankful first.
Yeah.
Because we sign up for a lifestyle that sometimes is very, very uncertain and has been deemed unnecessary. Currently, it's not an essential business, right? Entertainment is not essential. And that was a very hard thing for, I think, a lot of us to hear. And, you know, some of us get into this game to change the world, or some of us get into it to because our parents did it and we don't know much else to do, or because we just loved it, or because we were lucky enough to have opportunities early on. And you know, staying grateful and thankful in the midst of all of that, and it leads to everything else. You know, if you stay grateful and thankful, well, then you're never the a-hole with an attitude in the setting. And then, you know, even if you're not playing at the biggest, you know, arena with the biggest artists or whatever, the fact that you have a good attitude about where you are, that's everything. Because then maybe you do a good job at the gig, and maybe somebody will recommend you for something else based on, man, they were so great to work with.
Yeah.
They were so great to work with. Not only could they play and they were prepared, but they were so easy as a person. Because there's tons of great players that are not the nicest people.
Yeah.
And they do have that chip on their shoulder, and they do maybe have a a substance problem, and you hear about it a lot, or at least I do. So I would just say, focus on your craft and try to love what you do first, and then also, remember that you're presenting yourself to the world like they see you before they hear you a lot of the time. And try to present yourself in a way that's that they can understand you, and that they can see you for who you are, which is hopefully a nice, decent person. And a lot of the gigs you'll get will be based upon that more than your actual playing. There's some musicians that I've played with and that have come and gone or whatever, or that I see, and they're not the greatest players. They're not the whatever their instrument, the king of their instrument at all. But like, they're so easy to work with, and they have such a great attitude. And a lot of times, that, as weird as it is, that sometimes is who you'll meet out there when you're playing with other people. So I would just say, again, love what you do and work hard at it, but also be a good person and try to be nice and easy to work with. Don't make too many demands, and just, that's what I would say. I think the rules of, you asked, that's the rules of kind of, they're called the rules of the road, but also like just general etiquette, I think that we see, in terms of covering stuff, what's on my mind a lot lately, if you're asking, is the Instagram, YouTube world has created a new type of musician that is not used to playing out in the jungle. And they're used to having 40, 50 takes. They're used to being on camera, as opposed to being in the moment. And, it's great for a lot of things, but I personally don't follow a great many of those folks, because I'm not on social media much anyway, but also just because, like, the guys that I like tend to be just old farts, I guess, maybe. Just older, and they don't care if anyone's looking at them. And maybe I should care more that people are watching. I've definitely needed to focus more on, smiling a little bit more, like shave every once in a while, stuff like that. But just basic stuff. It's not, I don't know.
Well, hey, speaking of one last thing. So your single comes out the second week of November. Where can people find it?
Spotify, Austin Skinner now, Instagram, Facebook, all the typical iTunes, everywhere music is available or sold. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and all Twitter and everything. YouTube, it'll be available everywhere.
Nice. So just Austin Skinner, no underscores or T. Nope. Easy peasy.
Yeah, just if it's rap music, it's not me, because there is an Austin Skinner who is a very talented modern day rapper. Sorry, I think I lost you again. Are we there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're there.
There's an Austin Skinner who is from like Virginia or something.
Okay.
And he and I occasionally get tagged in each other's stuff.
Yeah.
And he's a very talented, trap, rap type guy, and we always get a kick out of seeing each other tagged and stuff. So if it sounds like trap music, it's not me, but you definitely should check him out anyway. So.
Well, dude, man, we appreciate you being here so much, dude. Go check out Austin Skinner, find him on the web, and be looking for that single the second week in November. Austin, thanks so much, man. We appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, man. It's good to see you as always.
All right. We'll see you soon on the Bandemic podcast.